The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. Picture two brothers, Dick and Maurice, in the 1930s. They've just rolled into California from New Hampshire with nothing but high school diplomas and dreams bigger than their empty wallets. After a few stumbles, they open this tiny drive-in restaurant in San Bernardino, and honestly, it absolutely takes off. These guys were genuine innovators, the kind who see problems everyone else accepts and say, "Watch this." They created what they called the speedy service system, basically an assembly line for hamburgers. Nobody had seen anything like it. By the 1950s, their little spot with that simple neon sign reading "McDonald's Hamburgers" is printing money. Their small-town royalty, living a life they'd only imagined back in New Hampshire. They had everything figured out. The perfect system, the perfect product, the American dream delivered. Except, here's the twist. The McDonald brothers never went further than that. Their story, despite all that success, essentially ended right there in San Bernardino. Meanwhile, some guy named Ray Kroc shows up, takes their concept, and builds it into a worldwide phenomenon, serving millions of people every single day. So what happened? How does someone build an empire with another person's brilliant idea, while the actual inventors stay exactly where they started? That question right there unlocks everything about success, influence, and making a real dent in the world. It's the secret the most impactful people throughout history have figured out. And it's exactly what we're unpacking today. We're exploring a book that's been the go-to guide for leaders for over a decade, selling millions of copies and translated into languages across the globe. The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. Maxwell isn't some theory guy locked in a university office. He's been in the trenches his entire life, leading actual people, screwing up, learning from it, and doing it better next time. He's trained millions of leaders everywhere, from Fortune 500 corner offices to presidential palaces. And what he discovered is that leadership isn't some magical gift you're either born with or not. It's learnable. It's a set of principles anyone can master. By the time we're done today, you'll understand the invisible barrier that keeps most people from their real potential. Even better, you'll learn the core principles that'll help you break through that barrier, not just for yourself, but for everyone you want to lead. This isn't about collecting fancy titles or bossing people around. This is about becoming someone others genuinely want to follow. So let's dive in. Let's get back to Dick and Maurice McDonald for a second. Their restaurant was like a perfectly tuned machine. These guys were management wizards. They could streamline a kitchen, slash costs, and get a burger into a customer's hands in 30 seconds flat. But when they tried to franchise the concept, to scale their dream, total failure. They managed to sell the idea to just 15 people, and only 10 actually opened restaurants. Why? Because they were brilliant at managing things, but they couldn't lead people. And this brings us to the very first and probably most crucial of Maxwell's laws, the law of the lid. Think of your leadership ability like a lid on a jar. No matter how talented you are, no matter how many hours you grind, your effectiveness can't rise above that lid. The McDonald brothers' leadership ability was maybe a 4 out of 10, so their business success topped out at around a 3. They were capped. All their genius was trapped under this low ceiling of leadership ability. Then, in 1954, Ray Kroc walks into their restaurant. He sold milkshake machines, and McDonald's was one of his best customers. But when he saw their operation, he didn't just see an efficient burger joint. He saw the future. He saw McDonald's restaurants spreading across America like wildflowers. Ray Kroc's leadership lid wasn't a 4. It was a 10. And because of that higher ceiling, He took their simple, brilliant concept and built something global. Between 1955 and 1959 alone, Kroc opened 100 restaurants. Today, there are over 31,000 worldwide. The brothers' weak leadership capped their success. Kroc's strong leadership blew the lid completely off. It's a tough pill to swallow, but it's critical to understand. Everything you'll ever accomplish gets limited by your ability to lead others. The higher you want to climb, the more leadership matters. So what did Ray Kroc have that they didn't? What is this elusive leadership thing? That brings us to another foundational law, the law of influence. The real measure of leadership is influence, pure and simple. It's not about titles. It's not about your position on the org chart. It's not about having the biggest office. Sure, a title might get your foot in the door. People might listen to you for a bit, because they have to. But genuine leadership, the kind that inspires people to follow you wholeheartedly, that has to be earned. Maxwell tells this story about his first job out of college. He had the degree, he had the official leader title in the organization, but he quickly realized he wasn't actually the real leader. At his first board meeting, he noticed that whenever this quiet farmer named Claude spoke up, everyone leaned in. When Claude made a suggestion, people took it seriously. Claude had zero official authority, but he had influence. He was the actual leader in that room. History's packed with examples like this. Think about Mother Teresa. She was this small, frail woman with no corporate power, no political office. Yet when she spoke, presidents and prime ministers stopped to listen. She built the Missionaries of Charity, which grew to over 4,000 members during her lifetime, serving in dozens of countries. Why? Because of her massive influence. She had the law of solid ground working for her. Trust is the absolute foundation of leadership. People could sense her character ran deep, and that character created trust. And trust makes leadership possible. On the flip side, think about Abraham Lincoln before his presidency. During the Black Hawk War, they made him a captain because he'd gathered the volunteers. But he knew nothing about military life. He couldn't even remember the right commands to march his men through a gate. Over time, his influence actually went down. By the end of his service, this future president of the United States had been demoted all the way to private. His title meant nothing, because he hadn't yet earned the influence to back it up. So how do you build this influence? How do you earn that trust? It doesn't happen in a week. As Maxwell explains in The Law of Process, leadership develops daily, not in a day. It's like smart investing. You don't get rich overnight. You invest consistently over time, and your assets compound. The secret to anyone's success is found in what they do every single day. Look at Theodore Roosevelt. We remember him as this tough, larger-than-life, Rough Rider president. But he didn't start there at all. As a kid, he was small, sickly, and had asthma so bad, his parents worried he might not make it. But when he was 12, his father told him straight up, "You have the mind, but you don't have the body. You must make the body." And that's exactly what young Teddy did. Day after day, he disciplined himself, working out with weights, hiking, boxing, building himself piece by piece into the powerful figure history remembers. He lived the law of process. This daily commitment to growth and discipline is what forges the character that earns trust. And once people trust you, they start to respect you. That's the law of respect. People naturally follow leaders who are stronger than themselves. Think about it. When you're in any group, who do you tend to listen to? Who do you naturally defer to? You gravitate toward whoever seems most capable, the person with the clearest vision, the most confidence, the strongest character. We don't follow people randomly. Someone who's an 8 on the leadership scale doesn't look for a 6 to follow. They look for a 9 or a 10. The story of Harriet Tubman is one of the most powerful examples of this law. Here's a woman who, on paper, had absolutely everything stacked against her. She was a former slave, couldn't read or write, and lived in a society that didn't respect women or African Americans. And yet, she became one of the most powerful leaders of her era. People called her Moses because she led over 300 people out of slavery to freedom on the Underground Railroad. She was so respected that the famous revolutionary John Brown called her General Tubman and said she could command an army better than any man he'd known. Why? Because her strength was undeniable. She was fearless. When someone on the journey wanted to turn back, she'd pull out her pistol and say, "You go on or die," because she knew a captured person would be tortured into revealing the railroad's secrets. Her courage was absolute. People in the presence of that kind of strength, that kind of character, couldn't help but respect her and follow her. That's the law of respect in action. But this kind of strength, this level of leadership, always costs something. This is the law of sacrifice. A leader must give up to go up. As you rise in leadership, your responsibilities grow, but your rights shrink. You lose the luxury of thinking only about yourself. Look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. With every step he took advancing civil rights, the personal cost got higher. It started with arrests and threats. Someone threw a bomb onto his porch. He was stoned, stabbed, and jailed countless times. The higher he rose as a leader, the more he was asked to give up, until finally he gave up his life for what he believed in. He understood that sacrifice sits at the heart of good leadership. This is the internal side of leadership. It's built on influence, which comes from trust, which is earned through character that's forged by daily discipline, and sacrifice, which ultimately commands respect. That's your foundation. But once you have that foundation, where are you taking people? A leader's job isn't just being someone important, it's doing something important. It's taking people somewhere, and that requires a completely different set of skills. It starts with the law of navigation. Anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. A navigator sees the entire journey in their mind before leaving the dock. They anticipate obstacles, plan for problems, and have a crystal clear vision of the destination. Maxwell shares this chilling story of two explorers in 1911, both racing to be first to reach the South Pole. One was a Norwegian named Roald Amundsen. He was a master navigator. He meticulously planned every detail, studying methods from experienced Arctic travelers, choosing the right equipment, dog sleds, and setting up supply stations all along his route. His journey was a success. The other leader was a British naval officer, Robert Falcon Scott. His expedition was the complete opposite. He chose the wrong equipment: motorized sledges that broke down and ponies that couldn't survive the cold. His supply depots were poorly stocked and too far apart. His team suffered frostbite, snow blindness, and starvation. They did reach the South Pole, completely exhausted, only to find the Norwegian flag already planted there. Amundsen's team had beaten them by over a month. The journey back was even worse. Scott and his entire team died in that frozen wasteland, just miles from safety. He had courage, sure, but he was a terrible navigator. And because he failed at the law of navigation, he and his followers paid for it with their lives. But even with the world's best map, you're not going anywhere if you can't get people on board with you. This is the law of buy-in. People buy into the leader first, then the vision. This is where so many aspiring leaders stumble. They think if their idea is brilliant enough, people will just automatically follow. But it doesn't work that way. We don't initially follow causes. We follow worthy leaders who champion causes we can believe in. Think of Mahatma Gandhi. His vision for India's independence was radical, non-violent civil disobedience. This was a country used to violent protest. Why would millions adopt such an unfamiliar and difficult approach? Because before they bought into nonviolence, they'd bought into Gandhi himself. They trusted him. They believed in him as a leader. And because they bought into the leader first, they were willing to embrace his dream. The leader finds the dream, then the people. The people find the leader, then the dream. So how do you get people to buy into you? This is where the law of connection comes in. Leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. You can't move people to action unless you first move them emotionally. It's about building a relationship, even if just for a moment. Maxwell points to two defining moments in George W. Bush's presidency. The first was days after September 11, 2001. President Bush went to Ground Zero, stood on a pile of rubble with his arm around a firefighter, grabbed a bullhorn, and shouted to the rescue workers, "I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon." In that moment, he connected. He touched the heart of a grieving, angry nation. Compare that with 2005, after Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans. Instead of going to the city, President Bush was photographed looking down at the flooding from Air Force One's window. To the people suffering below, it was a picture of disconnection, of indifference. No matter what he did afterward, he could never undo that image. He'd failed to connect. The most powerful way to connect, to get buy-in, and to navigate effectively is through the law of the picture. People do what people see. Your actions are the loudest message you'll ever send. Maxwell uses the incredible story of Easy Company from Band of Brothers. During training, they had a commander named Herbert Sobel. He was a tyrant who drove his men mercilessly but didn't hold himself to the same standards. He was incompetent and cowardly, and his men despised him so much they actually talked about shooting him in battle. He painted a terrible picture of leadership. Then there was Lieutenant Dick Winters. His philosophy was simple: officers go first. In one famous battle, his men were pinned down by machine gun fire, huddled in ditches, too terrified to move. Winters tried everything to get them to advance. Finally, he just jumped into the middle of the road himself, with bullets kicking up dust around him, and yelled for them to move. Seeing their leader out there exposed and fearless, they all got up and charged. People do what people see. Winters didn't just tell them the plan. He was the plan. He was courage personified. Now, you might be thinking, this is a lot. Being a great leader sounds like you need to be superhuman, and you're right. No single person can do all of this perfectly. That's why the next set of laws is about moving beyond yourself. Because no leader, regardless of talent, succeeds alone. This is the law of the inner circle. A leader's potential is determined by those closest to them. Even the world's most talented person is limited without a great team. Think of Lance Armstrong. People called him a freak of nature for his physical abilities. He won the Tour de France, one of the most brutal athletic events on the planet, an astounding 7 times in a row. But here's the secret. He wouldn't have won a single one of those titles without his team. In cycling, the team rides to protect its leader, to block wind, to chase down rivals, sacrificing their own glory for his success. Armstrong was the first to admit this. His potential was unlocked by his inner circle. So who should be in your inner circle? How do you find these people? That's where the law of magnetism comes in. Who you are is who you attract. This is powerful and sometimes humbling. If you're positive and hardworking, you'll attract other positive, hardworking people. If you're a visionary leader, you'll attract other leaders. But if you've got a bad attitude, or questionable character, you'll attract people who reflect that back. As Maxwell puts it, birds of a feather flock together. He tells this great story about the church he took over. His predecessor was a gifted musician, and the church was packed with talented singers and instrumentalists. When Maxwell, who's a leader but not a musician, took over, the number of new musicians joining dropped. But guess what kind of people started showing up? Leaders. Because that's who he was. He was a magnet for leadership. Once you've attracted these people, once you have your inner circle, what's your job? It's not to control them. It's to unleash them. This is the law of empowerment. Only secure leaders give power to others. Insecure leaders feel threatened by talented people. They hoard power. They micromanage everything. They're scared that if they help their people become too good, they'll become unnecessary themselves. The story of Henry Ford is a tragic example. He was a genius who revolutionized an entire industry. But he was deeply insecure. He felt so threatened by any rising star in his company that he systematically undermined them, including his own talented son, Edsel. He created a culture of fear and backstabbing that nearly destroyed the Ford Motor Company. The greatest leaders do the exact opposite. They're not afraid of being surrounded by people smarter or more talented than themselves. Abraham Lincoln famously filled his wartime cabinet with his political rivals, men who'd run against him for president. Why? Because he was secure enough to know he needed the best minds in the country to save the nation, even if they disagreed with him. Great leaders gain authority by giving it away. When you empower a team of leaders, something incredible starts happening. You create momentum, and this is the law of the Big Mo. Momentum is a leader's best friend. When you have no momentum, every tiny problem feels like climbing Everest. When you have the Big Mo on your side, you can crash through mountains like they're made of paper. The Pixar story is a perfect example. For years, they were this struggling little company, bleeding money, trying to convince the world that computer animation could tell real stories. They made a short film called Luxo Jr., the one with the 2 desk lamps, and it got nominated for an Academy Award. A small win. That small win gave them enough credibility to get a 3-movie deal with Disney. A bigger win. That deal led to Toy Story, a blockbuster that changed filmmaking forever. A massive win. And with that, the momentum became unstoppable. Hit after hit, A Bug's Life, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo. Eventually, the little company that could barely survive was bought by Disney to save their struggling animation studio. That's the power of the Big Mo. To create this momentum, you've got to be strategic. You can't just be busy for the sake of looking busy. This is the law of priorities. Leaders understand that activity isn't necessarily accomplishment. Maxwell lives by the Pareto principle, also called the 80-20th rule. It says that 20% of your activities will account for 80% of your results. A great leader doesn't try to do everything. They focus on the vital few things that give the greatest return. Maxwell gives a powerful personal example. He was living in beautiful San Diego but realized he was spending the equivalent of 27 full days a year just traveling to and from hub airports for connecting flights. He loved San Diego, but his priorities were his family and his work, so he made the painful decision to move himself and his companies to Atlanta, a major hub. That one decision gave him back almost a month of his life every single year. It was a hard choice, but it was a priority-driven choice. And this leads us to the final, most powerful stage of leadership. Once you have momentum, once you're focused on the right priorities, you can begin doing something that changes the very math of growth. This is the law of explosive growth. To add growth, lead followers. To multiply, lead leaders. This is the secret of the greatest leaders. They don't just attract followers. They develop other leaders. If you lead 10 followers, you get the work of 10 people. But if you lead and develop 10 leaders, you get the work of those 10 leaders, plus all the followers they influence. It's the difference between addition and multiplication. Maxwell's own organization, Equip, demonstrates this law perfectly. Their goal was to train 1 million leaders around the world. For a small nonprofit, that sounds impossible. But they didn't try to train 1 million people themselves. Instead, they focused on training 40,000 key leaders, with one condition. Each of those 40,000 had to commit to training 25 other leaders themselves. Do the math. 40,000 times 25 equals 1 million. They multiplied their efforts by developing leaders. They didn't just add. They exploded. And so we reach the end of the journey. What's all of this for? What's the ultimate purpose of leadership? This is the final law, the law of legacy. A leader's lasting value is measured by succession. It's not about what happens while you're in charge. It's about what happens after you're gone. A legacy lives on in people, not in buildings or quarterly reports. Significance comes when you develop leaders to do great things with you. But legacy, true legacy, comes when you put leaders in a position to do great things without you. Maxwell tells a story that brings this all home. Shortly after Mother Teresa passed away, he visited her headquarters in Kolkata. He arrived to find a ceremony happening. He asked a passing nun what was going on. She smiled and said, "Today we are taking 45 new members into our order." Mother Teresa was gone, but her legacy was alive and growing. She'd developed leaders who were carrying on her vision. In the end, what do you want your life to be about? Maxwell says that someday people will summarize your entire life in a single sentence. His advice? Pick it now. What is your life sentence? Because the way you lead today determines the legacy you leave tomorrow. And that legacy is the truest measure of a leader. As we step back and look at the whole picture John Maxwell has painted, what really jumps out is how deeply human leadership is. In a world obsessed with metrics, technology, and complex systems, Maxwell gently brings us back to basics. He reminds us that leadership isn't about spreadsheets. It's about people. It isn't about power. It's about empowerment. It's not a monologue from the top of a pyramid. It's a conversation, a relationship built on trust. What I find most powerful about the 21 Irrefutable Laws is that it demystifies leadership without making it seem cheap or easy. It takes this big, intimidating concept and breaks it into understandable principles, but it never suggests it's simple. Actually, it's the opposite. The laws demand a lot from us. They demand self-awareness through the law of the lid, character through the law of solid ground, courage through the law of sacrifice, and genuine care for other people through the law of connection. This book isn't a checklist to complete. It's a mirror to hold up. It forces you to ask the hard questions. Am I the kind of person I'd want to follow? Am I lifting people up or holding them down? Am I building something that'll last, or just building my own ego? For anyone starting their journey, whether you're 17 or 70, this can feel overwhelming. But the beauty of Maxwell's approach is that it all starts with a single step. It all begins with the daily, quiet discipline of the law of process. You don't become a great leader in a day. You become one day by day. So how can you start applying these timeless ideas to your life right now, today? Here are 3 simple, practical actions you can take. First, identify your lid. Take a moment for honest self-reflection. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your current leadership ability, your influence, your character, your ability to connect with others? Don't judge the number. Just be aware of it. Because as Maxwell taught us with the McDonald brothers, your effectiveness will never permanently rise above that lid. Knowing your number is the first step to raising it. Second, practice the law of connection today. You don't need a title to be a leader. You just need to care. Find one person in your life, a teammate, a classmate, a family member, and just connect. Ask them about their goals, their dreams, their struggles, and then just listen. Don't try to solve their problems. Just be present. Touch a heart before you ever think about asking for a hand. And third, find one person to add value to. The essence of leadership is service. Who's one person you can help today? Who can you encourage? Who can you share a resource with? Who can you empower, even in a small way? True leadership isn't about being in charge. It's about lifting others up. Start with one person. See how it feels. Then do it again tomorrow. That was a deep dive into the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. We've explored some of the most powerful stories and principles from this incredible book, but I'll be completely honest with you. A summary, no matter how detailed, is like looking at a photograph of a magnificent feast. You can see what's on the table, but you can't taste the food. The real nourishment, the real magic, happens when you sit down and experience it yourself. If any of the stories or laws we discussed today sparked something in you, if they made you think or challenged you in any way, I genuinely encourage you to pick up a copy of the book. Reading it isn't just an exercise in learning. It's an investment in the person and the leader you have the potential to become. The link to the book is waiting for you in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and you want to continue exploring the ideas that have shaped the world's most successful people, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know we're on the right track, and it ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing and leading together.